Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Gwei Refuel, where we recap the latest news in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm your host, Anthony Sassano, and it's the 30th of January 2023. Alright everyone, let's get into it. So, starting off today's episode, we have a nice little graphic here from Tony, who runs the mevboost.pix website that I've highlighted a bunch of times before, and he tweeted a caption here saying, a subset of the largest validators, their relative size, their block building preferences, and the relative number of OFAC incompliant blocks proposed. So you can see here the entities that propose blocks that have a large set of validators as part of their validator set here: Lido, Kraken, Coinbase, Binance, all the big names that we're all well aware of. Now, what this chart shows is basically where they fall on the MEV boost and vanilla building side of things. So you can see here that there are only two vanilla builders on this, chart right now, Vitalik and mintdice.com. So they're not using MEV boost at all. And then you have at the top all of the other, big validators using MEV boost. Now, this shows basically the number of incompliant blocks they've proposed. So you can basically say that if you're on the high side here, it means that you haven't proposed a lot of OFAC compliant blocks, and if you're on the low side, it means you have proposed a lot. So it's basically just a way to show which validators or kind of set of validators is censoring the most, or OFAC compliant. Is the term the cool kids use, right? So you can see, on the furthest right here, you have Wex Exchange, and then Bitfinex and Bitcoin Suisse as like the top three, and then the bottom three would be Figment, Infstones, and Cream, I believe. Or no, Binance and Figment are basically neck and neck there. And then in the middle, you really have a bunch of providers like Lido, Kraken, Coinbase, OKX, Rocket Pool, and Huobi, just there, but not really. But basically, if we're going like right in the middle, it's mostly Rocket Pool, I think is closest to the middle. And then, in terms of size at least, and Lido and Coinbase, obviously Lido being the biggest here and Coinbase being the second largest. But I think being in the middle here is probably healthiest, because what being in the middle shows is that you have a very healthy set of validators and a very healthy set of relayers that you support. Now, I think people sometimes get the misconception that once a relayer goes live, whether it be a censoring or non-censoring one, it is instantly able to be used by these validating services. And if you're a solo validator, yes, you could obviously instantly add it to your validator and away you go. Same with Rocket Pool. I think you have to do it as a custom thing, but you can do it, and then they add it to the smart node stack later. But with something like Lido, because you are out, I should say if you're a Rocket Pool mini pool operator, but with something like Lido, you are relying on Lido implementing this support for those relayers. And as far as I know, Lido doesn't currently have support for the agnostic relay or the ultrasound money relay, which are the two of the biggest non-censoring relays besides Blocktrout Max Profit right now. And I don't think Coinbase or Kraken has support for them yet, because they're relatively new as well. So because of that, they're bunched up in, the middle here, because they support, I believe all of the big ones support Blocktrout Max Profit, and obviously Flashbots, and I think a couple of other censoring ones. I'm not entirely sure of all the ones that they support, but I think just generally my thoughts on this is that in the middle is probably okay. Obviously, we want them to be on the right side as much as possible, but if we're sticking in reality, if we're sticking with what's practical, then in the middle is where it's going to be. I mean, because you look, even Rocket Pool, right? Rocket Pool is as close to solo staking as you're going to get in terms of shared values and decentralization and health of the beacon chain and things like that. But they're still in the middle here, and solo stakers would be there too. It's obviously very hard, if not impossible, to map out the solo stakers, but I reckon that they would be in the middle as well, because I know a bunch of solo stakers, and these are big solo stakers. They have hundreds of validators, and they are not only using non-censoring relays. I mean, I personally am obviously on my Rocket Pool mini pools, and I'm not using MEV boost on my solo validators yet. I probably will in the future, but not just yet. But in terms of solo validators, I guess generally, I would think that most of them, the ones that are using MEV boost, are going to be using pretty much every relayer, because you can just add all of them, and then whatever one comes through is the one that comes through, and that's it. Whereas there'll be some people like me who will only use the unregulated ones. It just depends on who you are, right? It just depends on what you want to do, because there is obviously a profit motive here that if you only support half of the, I guess, like relay market share, then you're going to, I mean, it's not obviously an exact math or an exact science, but I guess in theory, you would lose up to half of the rewards that you would have gotten if you had supported the entire suite of relayers here, because you're not going to be getting the juicy rewards from these other relayers. And we've all seen how juicy some of the rewards can be, right? The MEV stuff is like the relayer and the MEV boost stuff is kind of like a lottery. If you win the block as a solo staker, you stand to gain a lot, but it's usually the bigger providers that win that block because they have a lot more validators than you. Lido tends to win pretty big blocks because they have a lot of validators. Obviously, it increases their chances in terms of how much ETH they make from each block, but people still want to play that lottery. And why wouldn't you, right? I mean, as I've said before, the censorship stuff really is a profit issue, I guess, or an economic incentive issue, rather than an issue around validators or relays wanting to censor, right? I mean, the relays themselves is a bit of a different story because we've only got 8 or 9 of them, I think, and 4 of them are obviously censoring relayers, and they're doing that, I mean, pretty much because their lawyers have told them to, really, at the end of the day. They're not doing that because they want to. Like, I'm sure a lot of them don't want to be doing that, but if they're based in the US, they face those consequences if they don't support that, if they don't do what their lawyers tell them to do. But in turn, we got a lot of these uncensoring relays spun up, and the Ethereum ecosystem is taking censorship resistance a lot more seriously. So I actually think that the OFAC sanctions have been a net positive for Ethereum, because at the end of the day, like, censorship resistance is really the only thing differentiating blockchains from a centralized database, and we needed to test that. Like, we basically, for, I guess, since Bitcoin had been born, we basically got away with no test of these claims of censorship resistance on these chains for a very long time. Now Ethereum is facing a incredible test, and it's done incredibly well, I believe. I know some people will say, oh, well, it's still up at like 65% or whatever it is, OFAC compliance on the all blocks, not just the MEV boosted blocks. And I'll say, yeah, sure, it is. But at the end of the day, not one single transaction has been censored on Ethereum. Ethereum is still censorship resistant, but obviously but obviously that number has come down as well from like 85%-ish, and we want to get that number as low as possible. Unfortunately, there's probably only 2 ways that we could actually drop the censorship or drop the OFAC compliance to 0%. One of them would be to make everything fully private, so that validators and relays would have basically no visibility into what they're actually processing. And then you could have something like a mature proposer builder separation, and even that would be not a foolproof method of fixing this. Or you could have like a shutterized beacon chain thing where basically in the mempool everything is private, then once it goes on chain it's public. But yeah, I mean, there are smarter people than me thinking about this, and I'm very confident that they're going to come to a conclusion that works. But we've already come up with a bunch of solutions, as I've mentioned before, on the Refuel around this, and it's just very encouraging to see that there. Anyway, enough on that. I've talked so much about the censorship and MEV boost stuff on the Refuel, but there always seems to be another thing to talk about when it comes to that stuff. All right, so Erigon has updated their roadmap for 2023. Now, I talked about their roadmap just a little while ago, maybe only a few weeks ago, on the Refuel, but this is another updated one where basically they've got Erigon and Erigon 2, 3, and 4 all listed here with all of the relevant line items, or I guess like items in their roadmap and what they want to be supporting and doing. So, I mean, I'm not going to go through this again. I obviously pointed out the big changes or I guess like the big improvements that are coming for Erigon. A lot of it is around sync time of things like archive nodes and getting the disk footprint below 2 terabytes, which would be very, very cool because, look, an archive node that is 15 terabytes today, a Geth archive node, I believe, or somewhere around that. Syncing that takes a while, but it's not just syncing that's the issue. It's the getting the solid state drive, I guess like SSD storage, which can get quite expensive, and getting it to basically 15 terabytes. I don't even know if you'd be able to get 15 terabytes. You could probably do 8 terabytes SSD or get 2 of those, but maybe that might not be enough. So you'd want to get a third. And if you're going to buy 3 8 terabyte SSDs, I think it's going to cost you depending on which brand you go for, it's going to cost you anywhere from $3,000 to $4,000 right now to do that. So that's just the SSDs. Then you want to have a relatively powerful PC in order to sync it as fast as possible, and the sync time's still going to take you a little while. Now, Erigon wants to basically radically change that. They want to get the sync time down to a few days rather than a few weeks. They want to get the disk footprint down to under 2 terabytes so that you can just cheaply sync an archive node, and there's a bunch of other improvements that they want to do as well to their Erigon client. So, I mean, I'm a big fan of what Erigon's been trying to do. I mean, they basically started off like this. They started off with a mission of making an archive node a lot easier to sync, and they have actually succeeded a lot in that, but they're not just stopping at what they've done so far. They really want to push the envelope forward here, and they really want to be able to get this archive node synced down as much as possible, and obviously getting the full node synced down as well, not just for Ethereum, but also for other chains, other EVM chains. They're actually wanting to do BNB chain, Polygon POS chain, and Gnosis chain as well. And I'm sure they may even look to do layer 2s as those continue to grow, and maybe they make a client for a layer 2 there. Because as I've said before, layer 2s will also have client diversity. There's not just going to be one client that runs everything. There's going to be multiple ones at the mature layer 2s, just like there are on layer 1 Ethereum. But you can go check out this roadmap for yourself. I'll link it in the YouTube description below. All right, so John Chabano, hopefully I said that last name right, has put out a nice little model about Ethereum over the weekend, over the weekend, where he said, this is a detailed functional Ethereum model including a long-term roadmap items, flexible to easily run any scenarios / timing, e.g. when 4844, dank sharding, roll-up data compression rates, staking rates, fees, MEV burn, issuance, etc., and it's a spreadsheet on Google Docs. So basically, the TLDR of what this is, and you can go through it yourself, of course, I'll link it in the YouTube description below, but what this is a very advanced calculator based on current and future upgrades for Ethereum block space, and what that would mean for ETH, what that would mean for the ETH annual inflation rate, whether it be deflationary, what that would mean for staking yields, right? And you can see all the different fields here, and you can edit basically all of this if you fork the sheet, and then you can add in all the different assumptions like 4844, dank sharding being live, all that sorts of stuff. And it scrolls across the screen as well. There's a bunch of other stuff here too. And then there's also the different drop downs and key terms that you can look at as well. So there was a few of these sheets floating around prior to the merge. I remember Justin Drake had one that he had made, but it wasn't this detailed. It didn't have assumptions, at least from memory, it didn't have assumptions around 4844 and dank sharding and things like that. It basically did like a naive approach, took the existing data of the bull market, I guess, and extrapolated it from there. And that's how we got, during 2021, 10 to 15% yield estimates for ETH staking. Now, that's not to say that the yield can't go back up there. With the fee revenue that we saw in 2021, if we repeat that in the next bull market or anytime in the future, those staking yields should definitely go up to 10% plus. I mean, obviously it depends on how much ETH is staked, but I mean, if 10%, if there's a 10% yield on ETH staking, I would expect a lot of ETH to be staked at that point, and that would actually bring it down, obviously, because more validators online need to be paid. That would bring the yield down for everyone. But even like a 5% yield on ETH, and this is an ETH denominated yield, obviously, is very, very good. And I think currently it hovers around 5 to 7%. I think on average over the last few months it's been 5.5 to 6%, and it can go as high as 7%, but it depends on the time frame that you take. Obviously that's measured out yearly, but that's extrapolating a lot. So I think that we would have to kind of see, I guess, like on September 15th this year, we could get the whole year and see what the average was from the merge till obviously a year after the merge, and then we could get a more accurate number. But generally, it's always going to be estimates, because obviously fee revenue and MEV revenue are very volatile, and issuance as well can move, because obviously post withdrawals is going to actually move in both directions, because the more ETH staked, the more issuance there is, but the less issuance that goes to stakers. So the more issuance overall, but the issuance that goes to stakers is less for them, right? Because it's spread out there. And then obviously the less there is, the more there goes to the stakers, the less there is on the network-wide inflation. So anyway, I highly recommend checking this sheet out if you want to play around with it. make your own assumptions, put in your own numbers, see what's going on with different upgrades enabled and disabled and all that good stuff there. It's a really great sheet that John has made. I'll link it in the YouTube description below for you to check out. All right, so speaking of staking, Armagan.eth here put together a curated list of awesome Ethereum staking resources. Now, I think I may have highlighted this before on the Refuel because I think I've seen something similar to this before. I can't remember exactly, but I just figured it was worth highlighting again anyway. If you want to learn everything there is to learn about Ethereum staking, whether it's being able to spin up your own solo staking node or a rocket pool node, or learning about how everything works under the hood, learning about the different clients, the analytics, everything here. I mean, MEV, LSDs, all this stuff. Like, it's crazy. DVT. It's crazy how much Armagan has packed into this little resource here. I mean, I highly recommend going and checking this out. I'll link this in the YouTube description for all you to do so, but this will keep you busy for quite a while, actually. Remember how I told you guys that if you were bored or looking for things to, I guess, learn more about, you could go to the L2Beat website and read all about layer 2s and all about how they're different, ZKVMs, optimistic rollups, all that good stuff there, Validium, stuff like that. Well, this resource is just as good, except obviously for Ethereum staking and everything that surrounds it. And you may not think that Ethereum staking is as, I guess, like complex or is as what's the word I'm looking for? Exciting maybe as layer 2s, but it definitely is. There is so much going on in the Ethereum staking ecosystem. It's actually quite insane. I mean, I think Ethereum staking is going to be that trillion-dollar industry that I've talked about before, just by virtue of the fact that there's so much excitement about it. Like, not just on the, obviously, just staking your ETH front and earning a yield on it, but all the products that are being built around it, all the new products that are coming online. Like, I'm super excited for products like Stakewise's V3, which allows solo stakers to basically have an LSD tied to their solo stake in a fully decentralized way, and also be able to basically run validators as a solo staker and outsource the I guess, like ETH collection to the public. So for example, this already happens in DPoS networks where essentially you could spin up your own node or your own validator, I should say, in a DPoS network, and people could delegate their stake to you. But Ethereum Proof of stake is very different to DPoS. So what Stakewise is doing is that they're creating these things called vaults, which basically allow, me, for example, or anyone to run validators on their hardware and then basically source ETH from the public, and it could be done in a non-custodial and decentralized way. And then obviously the operator takes a fee. Now, this would be like me becoming a Lido, for example, right? Or me becoming a Coinbase or a Kraken. Now, obviously, I don't know the legalities around that, the regulations around that. But if it is actually non-custodial, which I think it is, there shouldn't be many, because a lot of the regulations, well, actually from my studying of this, almost all financial regulations have something to do with custody. As soon as you take custody out of the equation, most financial regulations actually disappear. Like, they're not needed, and they actually don't do anything, right? They're not actually protecting anyone. So I think from that point, if it's non-custodial, then it's obviously very, very, very awesome and very easy to do for people, because there's no need for them to go through regulatory stuff or anything like that. But that's not legal advice, obviously. That's just me speaking my mind. But you should definitely go check out this awesome Ethereum staking resource from Armagan. I'll link this in the YouTube description below for you to do so. All right, so Stephen Goldfeder from Off-Chain Labs, they build Arbitrum, obviously, has put out a tweet thread that started a bit of a holy war amongst the Layer 2 roll-up, teams and individuals over the last 48 hours. So Stephen started off his thread by saying, there's a narrative out there that ZK rollups will be able to do everything that optimistic rollups do, but better. The way this story goes is that we're just waiting for ZK rollups to be ready, but as soon as they are, they win hands down. Let me tell you why I disagree. Now, this is a rather long thread, which I'll link in the YouTube description for you to check out for yourself, but I don't want you to just read this thread. I want you to read the quote tweets, and I want you to read the replies, because, as I said, this did start a holy war, and there's a lot of good back and forth between the different teams and the different individuals at these teams that is really educational. Honestly, I learned a lot from reading through all of this that I didn't already know. The TLDR of all my conversations and reading is that these researchers or these developers and these teams and individuals have very strong feelings about what they're building, and they have very good points around it as well. And there are arguments on both sides of the fence. I've always kind of positioned myself to be bullish on both optimistic rollups and ZK rollups for similar but also different reasons. And on top of that, I've always said that ZK EVMs or I guess like EVM compatible ZK rollups in general, they're going to, even though they're probably going to be live this year, there are a lot of things that go into, I guess, a layer 2 or rollup generally. There are a lot of things that rollups will be able to do that other rollups may not be able to do, or maybe they're very far behind on. There's no holy grail when it comes to this stuff. I know before I've said that ZK VMs are considered the holy grail, but there's like 3 or 4 different types of ZK VMs. There's like 5 different teams building ZK VMs, right? They're all at different stages of development. They're not going to be decentralized for quite a long time. Proving costs are still quite high. Like all this stuff is still in very, very early stages. So you can't actually give a definitive answer to any of this today. And that's why there are debates going on all the time around this. And obviously Stephen coming out and saying this started this little holy war because people are very passionate about this stuff. So yeah, just wanted to give my little take there. I'm not going to go over the contents of what Stephen actually said because I feel like it's better for you guys to go read the thread yourself and then read the debates that surrounded it to come to your own conclusions rather than me giving you my own conclusion here. I basically try to stay neutral, as you guys know, but I do have my thoughts that generally I think that this is very healthy for the ecosystem. This is competition at work. Like I find it amazing that a couple of years ago, none of the layer 2s were live. People still thought they were pipe dream, and then just a couple of years later, we're arguing over which layer 2 is better. Right. It just for anyone who out there who has been around since especially like earlier Ethereum days, like 2015, 16, 17, you know exactly how funny it is that we've gotten to this point. Because for the longest time, layer 2 seemed like a never-ending research project. And then, I mean, it kind of did because we started off with state channels, which was inherited from Bitcoin's Lightning Network. And then we worked on things like Plasma. And then we worked on things like sidechains during all of that as well. And then we came to rollups, and now we have different rollups like optimistic rollups and ZK rollups. But then we also have different ZK rollups, and we have different optimistic rollups, and then we have validiums, right? We have different types of those things. So it's just pretty awesome how many things have blossomed out of that initial research that came from back then. And it's pretty great to see how far we've come since then, to the point where we're just basically arguing over which one's better. Not about which one's going to work and which one's actually going to scale Ethereum. We're arguing over which one's going to be better for Ethereum, which one's going to scale Ethereum better, which I think is just amazing. Anyway, go read these threads. I'll link them in the YouTube description below. All right, last up here on the Ethereum front, because there is a little bit of Bitcoin news that I'm going to talk about, but on the Ethereum front, I came across this new project called Dove Protocol. Now, what Dove Protocol is trying to do is implement what I have spoken about before, which was the DAMM or DAM that Starkware introduced quite a while ago. Now, what this basically was a way to solve liquidity fragmentation across layer 2s. Basically allowed you to have a cross L2 AMM, not AMMM, and basically be able to tap into layer 1 liquidity as well. Now, Aztec Network already does this. They tap into layer 1 liquidity at layer 2 and obviously do it all privately, but they don't do the cross L2 L2 swaps. There are other, I guess, like bridging protocols that do it to an extent. They do it in a much slower fashion. But if you want, I guess, single slot or atomic composability between these L2s, that's a whole nother ball game. Now, Dove Protocol seems to be tackling this. There's not much information yet on what they are. They've just got a Twitter profile which you can go follow and a tagline of unified liquidity accessible anywhere. But I'm very, very excited to see another team jumping into the fray here, because as I said before, one of the biggest things to solve in terms of a friction point or UX friction point for users is being able to essentially tap into liquidity no matter where it is. It doesn't matter if it's on layer 1 or layer 2 or a layer 3 or a layer 4, whatever it is, right? What matters is that these things can all talk to each other, they can all compose with each other, and the end user is none the wiser about what they're actually using in the background to achieve what they want to achieve. So you can go read the short little blog post from Dove Protocol and also follow them on Twitter if you like. I'll leave links to that in the YouTube description below. All right, so I did say there was something about Bitcoin that I wanted to talk about, and it's basically taken crypto Twitter by storm. And honestly, it's one of the most interesting things that has happened on Bitcoin in a very long time. Now, I'll give you the TLDR. Essentially, someone figured out, or a group of people figured out, that you can now do NFTs on Bitcoin in a limited way, in a different way to how it works, obviously, on Ethereum and other smart contract chains. But you can actually do this, and this is something that Taproot enabled. So they're calling them inscriptions, and there's a good thread here from Casey, which I'll link in the YouTube description below. But what these inscriptions allow you to do is basically put NFTs on the Bitcoin blockchain using sats, using basically individual bits of BTC on the chain here. Now, I'm not going to go into the technical stuff of it. There's a bunch of links here that you can actually read to get the technical details of what's happening here. But what I wanted to focus on was a couple of things. First thing is, as I said, it's the most exciting thing that's happened in Bitcoin in a very long time. And that's quite funny because this is like a table stakes for Ethereum and other blockchains, right? To be able to do NFTs. And this Bitcoin NFT thing is not the same. It's very, very different, actually, and it's very, very limited in what it can do. And the funny thing is, the way it works is actually similar to how EIP 4844 is going to work on Ethereum, where these inscriptions basically take advantage of a special transaction type on Bitcoin called SegWit that allows you to stuff these things in the SegWit portion of the block, in the signature portion of the block, and allow you to fill up the block up to 4 megabytes. Even though the hard limit is still 1 megabyte on a Bitcoin block, this is basically ballooning it out to 4, and then it only and then there's kind of like consequences for the chain state and bloating the state and chain size and all that stuff. As I said, it gets quite technical when you talk about it, and I'm obviously not an expert on how Bitcoin works under the hood. I have a cursory understanding of it. But why it's exciting is because, this is the first functional thing that Bitcoin has been, first new functional thing that Bitcoin has been able to do in a very, very, very long time. I'm talking probably since SegWit was activated, and Taproot was activated as part of a soft fork, but no one was really doing anything with it for a very long time. Maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 years sort of thing, right? And now that people are doing it, it's causing division as well. And that's the second thing I wanted to talk about, where it is very exciting, but it's also causing a split in the Bitcoin community. And there are actual Bitcoin core devs saying that this stuff is junk. We don't want NFTs on Bitcoin. So they're basically encouraging miners to censor these transactions, which is a grand twist in irony. But anyway, regardless of that, the reason it's causing division is it comes to the social layer, because for years and years and years, Bitcoin has pushed out builders from its community, right? Because Bitcoin, you can't build on it. No one wants to build anything on Bitcoin. The community just says Bitcoin is done, it's finished. We'll do incremental, small, soft fork upgrades over longer periods of time, but we don't want any of this other stuff on here. We don't want NFTs. We don't want tokens. None of that stuff. Let's do that at the higher layers. We all know the story, right? So that obviously has pushed out all the builders, because if you're a builder, you're not going to go to Bitcoin if you can't build anything. So you go to other networks. Now, because of that, now that there's something that you can actually build on Bitcoin in a, albeit limited fashion, but you can still do it, most of the community are not builders, so they're pushing back against this. They think it's garbage. They don't want it on the network. They're looking for ways to remove it from the network or censor it from the network, and they're basically coping over this, trying to come to terms with this happening, because to them, they think NFTs, and they immediately think of Ethereum, and they hate Ethereum, right? They immediately think of these monkey JPEGs or other things, and they really, a lot of them think that NFTs are just an outright scam, like the mainstream seems to think, right? So that's led to a pretty big division in the community. Now, because of this, and because of the ongoing division here, I don't think they're going to attract builders to build things on Bitcoin. I mean, even though this is limited from a technical perspective, just from a social perspective, why would you go to Bitcoin and say, hey, I want to build NFTs on here, when you're just going to be welcomed with hostility from everyone? Where you can go on Ethereum and you can basically be like, I'm going to build this NFT thing, and you have thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people who will embrace your thing when you build it, and not be, I guess, not be hostile towards you for it. So there is that aspect, which I think is pretty important. Now, the last thing I wanted to talk about with regards to this as well is that I've seen some rhetoric around people saying, well, this solves Bitcoin's long-term security issues because it means people are going to pay fees to get these NFTs on the chain. They're going to price out regular transactions on Bitcoin. And then those transactions will have to compete and pay a higher fee. And then the Bitcoin fee revenue will go up because of this. I think this is really basically putting the cart before the horse in a huge way. Just because there's been some excitement and some activity around this over the past couple of weeks when people figured it out, doesn't mean that that's going to be sustainable. And extrapolating that out to be sustainable is bizarre in my mind. But of course, people latch onto this because they've been looking for a solution to Bitcoin's long-term security issues, right? And they haven't been able to come up with a good solution. And they think this is their holy grail. Now, if we go to cryptofees.info, we can see that Bitcoin's average fees fees over the last 7 days was $300,000 compared to Ethereum, which is $4 million. So Ethereum is over 10x more, generates more than 10x the fee revenue of Bitcoin. So can Bitcoin get to Ethereum? Can it even double from here just based on the demand for these NFTs? I don't think so, because the fee revenue has gone up a little bit because of this NFT stuff, but it's new, it's exciting. We've seen this play out on Ethereum and other chains plenty of times before. There are spikes in demand around new and exciting things, but most of the time it's not actually sustainable. And going back to what I was saying about the builder culture, where is that going to come from? Where are the builders going to come from? If there's not a builder culture there, it doesn't matter that Bitcoin allows you to build things on it. The builders aren't going to go there. And this is something that I've had a discussion with my friends about before, where they say, some of them have been concerned. They've said, what if Bitcoin allows rollups to be settled on its network? Then people are just going to build rollups on Bitcoin. And Ethereum's going to have competition from Bitcoin, which is the only other decentralized chain right now. Isn't that bad for Ethereum? Isn't that negative for Ethereum? And I basically say to them, no, because just because for some reason, if Bitcoin enabled the ability to do this, doesn't mean that the builders are going to go do this on Bitcoin, because Bitcoin does not have a builder culture. They'd have to build that up from scratch again. The community would have to embrace it, which I don't think they would, because if the community is, this hostile to something like NFTs on Bitcoin, which was enabled by a soft fork that these Bitcoiners were in favor of, right? Then what do you think they're going to be like when someone proposes or someone tries to push through, or a group tries to push through the ability to settle things or settle rollups on Bitcoin? They're going to be hostile to that, right? And then even if it gets through somehow, the builder culture is going to take a very long time to basically build out. It's going to take years, and Ethereum already has it, and the other chains already have it as well. So that's what I always say to people when they bring up that sorts of stuff there. So I don't think this is a solution to Bitcoin's long-term security issues. I do think that while it's exciting and it's cool to see this happening, I don't think it's long-term sustainable. I think it's a fad. I hope I'm proven wrong for Bitcoin's sake, right? But I don't think I am, because I've seen these play out on so many other chains before. It doesn't, just because it's Bitcoin doesn't make it special, doesn't make it different. You still need demand. Demand is obviously everything when it comes to this sorts of stuff. And I just don't think that there's going to be sustainable demand there for this. Anyway, on that note, that is it for today. So thank everyone for listening and watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to the newsletter, join the Discord channel, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Thanks, everyone.